Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
What does it take to build a technology manufacturing business from $93 million in revenues to $16 billion in a 13-year time frame? Former CEO of Flextronics, Michael Marks, should know, having built operations for the electronics manufacturer across 35 countries and integrating 100-plus acquisitions in the process. Marks was also an early investor and interim CEO at Tesla in 2007, besides founding investment firm Riverwood Capital and investing in disruptive startups like Crocs, Nutanix, GoPro and Drua. In his second entrepreneurial outing in 2015, Marks is leading Katerra, a technology company that's reimagining the $12 trillion global construction industry by building a full-stack venture that optimizes development, design and construction. Having raised $865 million from the Softbank Vision Fund earlier this year, Katerra is valued at over $3 billion. We caught up with Marks in Bangalore and began by asking him what learnings he's bringing from his electronics manufacturing days at Flextronics to Katerra.
When I was leading Flextronics, there were many companies doing that. But in the construction space, there's basically no companies doing it. And so we were a one-stop shop, or you could say vertically integrated supplier. And there the customers were the electronics OEM. So it's Apple and Cisco and Microsoft and so on. In the construction industry, we're doing the exact same thing. Fully integrated turnkey supplier, but in this case, the customers are the developers, who are the ones who buy the land and figure out what they want to build, where they want to build it, but then we do everything for them. In this business, there's nobody who's fully integrated. So every project stands alone. You know, a developer comes to do an apartment building and acts like they've never built one before, and starts over, and all the supply chain is for that project, and the architecture and engineering is for that project. And it doesn't work very well. Everybody knows it.
Why is it inefficient? Why do you believe that is an inefficient way of building buildings? We've been doing it forever.
So this business hasn't changed literally in 100 years. And I teach a class at business school at Stanford, and I always tell the students, if you think you have a great idea and nobody's doing it, the first thing you should ask is why. So we applied that same questioning to this industry. And I know why it is. It's because all the players in construction are cost plus. So architects charge by the hour, and the more hours, the more they make. Same for engineers, same for general contractors, same for subcontractors. So when you look at how this industry works, it actually thrives on inefficiency. In other words, there's no one who's incentivized to lower their costs because they just make less money. So if you have an industry built on cost plus players, they want more cost so they can have more plus.
Correct.
And so nobody is incentivized to change it. And so much as happens in other industries from technology, it takes somebody from outside the industry to look at it and go, this doesn't work. So how about if we come in, do all the things, and then we can drive down costs, and then we're the ones who will win all the business. And you know, you see that in many other, you know, you see it in Tesla Motors or Airbnb or Uber or WeWork.
Right.
These are people coming out of the technology industry and looking at how can they bring technology to change the way things are done, and that's all we're doing. It's a tried and true method. It just hasn't happened yet in the construction industry.
All right. You spoke of Tesla, so I'm going to bring that up. And,
sure.
I remember reading somewhere you said that you also were an interim CEO there
Yes,
back in
I was.
2007. You're also an investor in the company.
Yes.
And you said that Elon Musk's vision was not to build the best electronic vehicle. It was just to build the best car or the best vehicle.
That's right.
And is that the kind of thinking that you're bringing to Katerra?
When people think about you know, modular or prefab, there's always people talk about this off-site manufacturing. The first thing that comes to their mind is that it's going to be ugly and everything will be the same. And that's crazy. There's no reason to think that you can't use these technology techniques and make better buildings. So we tell all of our customers, take some of the savings and reinvest it. Like everywhere in the world, people are talking, governments and developers are talking about affordable housing. Affordable housing is a problem everywhere in the world. And the way people think about making housing affordable is to make it smaller and cheaper, which is not what people want. In fact, we've interviewed lots of people in these buildings, and you say, what things would you like to be different? And the first thing they say is they want more space. So making things smaller in order to make them cheaper doesn't work. What we have to do is apply technology and make things less expensive, but not smaller and cheaper. So we're trying to make things better at the same time as making them cheaper.
All right. Another parallel with what you did with Flextronics is actually building out a large global supply chain,
Right.
not just of materials, but also of intelligence, of software, of talent. Tell us how you're doing that and what are the learnings that you're taking from your experience in building this out in the electronics industry and building it out in the construction industry, more disorganized industry for sure,
right.
compared to the electronics industry. Even when you got into it, it was way more organized than what we see in construction, and I'm assuming that's true for anywhere in the world and in the US as well.
It is. You know, the thing is, again, what we're doing is somewhat new to the construction industry, but it's not new to industry. So electronics manufacturing, automobile manufacturing, aircraft manufacturing, I mean, scale businesses generally have software built out that helps people do things end to end. It just doesn't exist in this industry. So what's more difficult is we're having to create a lot of software to be able to knit things together because nobody does it. Because architects have their software and engineers have their software and construction, all that. But when you try to put it all together, nobody's done that. Even the really big companies like SAP and Oracle, they don't have end-to-end software for this industry. And so we're having to create a lot of it.
All right. There's an India Connect with Katerra. Talk us through that. You are actually looking at building out a large software enterprise piece out of Bangalore, and then you're looking at Pune developing as a hub for architects.
Right.
Talk us through that. Why India?
Well, India, that's a great question. So because of my experience at Flextronics, we had operations in multiple cities, in Bangalore, and in Delhi, and Gurgaon, and in Chennai. So I'm quite familiar with India as a software developer, which everybody knows, software and back office. What's fantastic in this industry is that we're building up a big center for architects and for engineers and for estimators. And again, I didn't really know the construction industry, but there's so much talent here, and there's so many young people, and they're open to new ideas, and we're trying to do this a different way. So the talent pool here, the size of the talent pool, I mean, today we have 100 or 125 people. We expect to have 500 to 1,000 in the next 3 years.
Okay.
And it's hard to do that in a lot of places, even in the United States. And so,
what do you think gives the Indian talent an edge? What are you finding about talent here in India that you're not finding back in the USA or in parts of Europe, for instance, where typically you would expect hiring of this nature to take place?
well, the simple answer and the truthful answer is it's education. I mean, there is such a good educational system here, and so many graduates. It's a big population. You have so many graduates. And that's true in China for like hardware stuff. People go to China for that, and you have the same answer. You just have a very big population, lots of interest and expertise. So, great place to work.
All right. In terms of the investments that you've raised so far in Katerra, earlier this year, $865 million from Softbank's Vision Fund. Some of your other investors include DFJ and, of course, Foxconn as well. What gets an investor like Softbank? I can understand they're investing in companies that are disrupting traditional industry. But what gets a company like Foxconn interested in investing in Katerra?
Well, Foxconn invested, first of all, when I started at Flextronics, we were 100 million. Foxconn was 100 million. When I left, we were 25 billion, and they were 150 billion. So we were 1 and 2, and we competed a lot.
Yes.
We have a great relationship and mutual respect.
Okay.
And Terry Gao, who runs Foxconn, put up a substantial amount of money early before we had revenue, just because he knew what I had done, and he said, I think this is going to work. But because this business fits the business model of Flextronics Foxconn so well, it was very easy to describe it. And he was like, this is fantastic, I get it. So he put up a lot of money.
All right.
So we've been lucky about this.
Okay. All right. And as far as SoftBank is concerned, it was a large round, and I know that you don't want to talk about the valuation at what Katerra is presently, but you believe that by the time you're done, Katerra could be anywhere between a $50 to $100 billion company?
Yeah, I do. So look, we've said publicly that it's a little north of $3 billion was the value
All right.
after this investment. This is a $12 trillion business worldwide. If you just look at residential, which is primarily where we work, that's $4 trillion worldwide. It's 3 times the size of the electronics manufacturing business. Foxconn's 180 billion, Flextronics 25 billion. So for us to be able to grow a 50 or $100 billion business in a market that's 3 times the size, we think that's doable. And there's less competition.
But these are global numbers, and you're presently focused only in the
We are.
US as far as completing and building projects is concerned. Of course, you have your global supply chain in place, and you have talent, for example, working for you out of India. By when might we expect Katerra to move out of the US into other markets? What about India as a market?
Well, I can say that, you know that there's big plans to do low-cost housing in India,
Yes.
as there is in Malaysia and China. And the answer is we get called every day to work in major countries all around the world. We will move into the other markets in another couple of years. We have so much work to do to get our systems really engineered properly and efficient in the US, and the market's so big in the US, there's no real reason to do it in other places.
All right. So might we expect in the early 2020s
Yes.
for you to make a formal foray into the Indian affordable housing market? And why just affordable?
Maybe even
Housing
sooner.
market.
I mean, we've had multiple conversations
With
here.
state
and-
governments or with local real estate
Well, there's
companies?
some both, because there's some government-driven initiatives, particularly
Right.
state by state,
Correct.
right? And so we've had discussions in various states, and
After running the electronics manufacturer Flextronics for 13 years, Michael Marks went on to launch his own investment firm Riverwood Capital in 2005, investing in companies like Tesla, Crocs, GoPro, Nutanix and Druva. Marks also served as an interim CEO at Tesla in 2007 and can be credited for steering the car manufacturer through a rough patch before the launch of the iconic Roadster. Let me begin by asking you, what's your playbook? Do you have a playbook? Is there a checklist of things that you look for, that you've identified in yourself as an entrepreneur, that you sometimes try to project or mirror onto the other person to see if there's going to be a fit?
there's a certain kind of a playbook. The thing is you get experience and get older, you start to have a little bit more pattern recognition and what works. I can say there's a few things that are relatively straightforward. One is the entrepreneur has to be a true believer. And what I mean by that is, you look at these great companies that have been built in the world. You look at electronics industry like, Microsoft or Amazon or Facebook or Google. The people who start these companies don't start them to make money. They start them because they're on a mission. They have some worldview of something that they can do and make big. And so I always start there. If the people are not passionate, if they're doing it because, the markets are rewarding artificial intelligence companies, so I want to go
let's
start
build
another.
one.
Right. That, in my view, never works. So yet many entrepreneurs start that way, and that doesn't work. So that's one thing. And I like to see people invest their own money or quit their jobs and
Okay.
take a lot of risk because
Okay.
it tells you that they really mean it.
Okay.
That's sort of back to the same passionate thing.
Some of the companies that you invested into, interesting stories around
Yeah.
those, right? Crocs. Then there's GoPro, which is in camera and imaging, which is different. Then there's something on the likes of Tesla, which is different. Then there's Nutanix, which is in a completely different space. Then
Right.
H2O.ai, for instance, and algorithms and trying to just change the way that's done. So it's not, your investments clearly aren't industry specific.
Well, look, there's some luck to this, but I would say that curiosity is a big part of what drives me personally.
All right.
And Crocs was ridiculous. Crocs was a story. These guys started out as a little distributor, and they went and got these shoes from a distributor in Canada, and they took them to boat shows. It started out as a boat shoe, and they sold them all out. Then they bought some more, and they sold them all out. And then a guy who worked at Flextronics actually decided to step in to run the company, and he said, "We got to go buy out the intellectual property." And so I put the money up. Here's plastic shoes with holes in them, and then I'd go to skiing, and people are wearing them in the winter, and you go, there's something weird here. How could it be that ubiquitous. I mean, it's something that really should just be for beaches in the summer. And so then we invested several times in that. And you know, now it's $1 billion company. People don't realize it because it was so faddish and terrible. We talked about it for a long time. But it's like in the top 5 shoe manufacturers in the world.
In the
it's
world.
a wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, now it's a big mature company and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but it was a great one. GoPro is fantastic, fantastic entrepreneur. And I just fell for the guy. I mean, you know, here's a guy who just, you know, I was talking about passion and authenticity. You know, he was a surfer, and he was really a surf bum, and he wanted to be able to take videos of himself surfing, and there wasn't the way, so he invented a camera. And I mean, what an incredible story. And then he went like from surf shops to bicycle shops by himself, showing this little thing going, you know, this way. I mean, he just built it from nothing. Serendipity on that one.
Serendipity on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
clearly. That's how a lot of things in life happen. Do you believe that?
I do. Tesla Motors, I got invested because a guy who worked at Flextronics went over there to run engineering, and he called me and said, we got this interesting little company, why don't you come have a look at it? And
Talking about Tesla, you ran the company as CEO for a
Yeah.
part, about half a year?
Yeah, it was about half a year,
About half a year
2007,
in
yeah.
2007. It was a difficult time for Tesla, right? One of the co-founders was leaving. Elon Musk was taking over. There was a lot of press around the turmoil between the founding team.
Yeah.
It was before the Roadster had launched.
Right.
And it was, so talk us through your experience there, and also lessons that you took away in terms of building teams, in terms of cultures within organizations, between co-founders.
it was quite chaotic, actually, which is not unusual for these startup companies. It was
Startups,
very
yes.
engineering oriented and stuff like that. The contribution that I made there was very straightforward in terms of my experience.
I believe there was a Marx list.
So what I did was I got there, and it was a bit of a turmoil, and there was people bringing in all kinds of inventory to ship cars. And my first week on the job, having talked to everybody, I sat down, got a bulletin board, you know, a blackboard, and I said, I want a list of all of the things that we now know that will keep us from shipping a car. And so we started making this list, which turned out to be 27 items, and some of them were pretty big, like we didn't have a transmission. That became known as the Marx list. And I said, okay, who owns this? Dead silence. Who owns this? Dead silence. So we went through them all, put somebody in charge of each one. This is pretty standard for how companies
Yeah.
operate, right?
Yeah.
And then we started having meetings every week on each one of those things. And we were planning, so I started in July of 2007, and the company was bringing in $30 million worth of inventory to produce cars in January. And we'd have gone out of business.
Yes.
So when I got that list, so he said, you know, I said to the guy who was the head of procurement, to go, stop everything. You know, and if we hadn't done that, all those materials would have showed up and the company wouldn't be able to afford them. And that was the major contribution that I made. Plus getting everybody focused on the way you introduce a product is you do this stuff. You have the Marx list, you just go through all the lists every week. We do it at Katerra.
Yeah.
And you know, fix them. And so the company did produce cars in January, but another year later.
Yes.
And so that was a real contribution, and you know, now it's really turned into a special company. That's a wonderful company. But I was there at a very early stage when it's mostly engineers, and we're just trying to get the first product out.
All right. But in terms of then building out a culture that's target oriented, you know, so, and it's a company of engineers. A lot of big startups, even in India, have started out that way. All of our e-commerce companies actually
Sure.
don't have people with experience in retail or FMCG or any of those streams. They're all engineers.
Right.
And given your experience of working with a lot of startups as an investor with Riverwood Capital, what are some of the things that young entrepreneurs, engineers looking to build large companies must keep in mind?
Well, you zeroed in on the biggest reason for failures in entrepreneurial companies, right? Is because you have a lack of domain expertise. And it's very difficult. You know, you can't have a successful commercial company that's all engineers. You can't. I mean, that's one function. But you have to have finance people and IT people and sales people and all that stuff. And it's difficult for many entrepreneurs who are engineers who start with an engineering culture to bring in the people that it takes to make a commercial enterprise. And that's why so many companies fail, or why investors replace the CEOs, because eventually they can't. You know, they just can't make a commercial enterprise. So in Tesla, you have all these engineers, and you had to create the product. But then the next step is then bring in salespeople and manufacturing people and all the other people. A lot of companies falter between those two steps.
With Flextronics, you had over 100 acquisitions
Yes.
that you did over 13, 14 years in building that company out. Now, that's a large number. Then integrating, making sure that cultures fit, work styles fit, and that each acquisition becomes adds value to the business.
I think building companies through acquisition is generally not a good idea, but I obviously did a lot of that. Well, the reason was we needed global scale there. I mean, when I started, we were very small and was clearly a big industry. It was very obvious to me early that if we didn't get big relatively fast, it wasn't going to work. Plus, we had to be in all these different countries. And so you can't start in another country. You have to go find a company to buy in that country and then build on it, right? But I did not have an M&A person. And most people are shocked about that. If you have M&A people, their job every day come to work and go find companies to buy, and I don't think that's the right way to do it. So every one of those 100 acquisitions came through the operating executives. Like, what did they need to build out their business? So the manufacturing guys, like, Cisco wants us to be in Hungary, so I better go find something in Hungary to buy so that we can do, meet that need. And that's the right way to do acquisitions, my view, is make sure that the operating people are building their business that way, and it's not some finance top-down, let's see if we can grow revenue and go find something to buy. My simple speech was, you can do it on your own, you can do it with us. Why don't we just do it together? It'll be more fun, and that worked for most places.
So you had a sign up in your office, I believe, at one point of time that said it's not the big companies that eat the small ones, it's the fast ones that eat the slow ones. Right? Do you still...
How do you know that? That is a sign I had in my office. It is still
in your
my
office.
favorite saying.
Okay.
The big companies don't move very fast, and that's what creates the opportunities for all these entrepreneurs. And that creates a wonder. That's the natural spin. But I think that you just have to move fast, make decisions, don't have a lot of bureaucracy, don't have a lot of meetings. It's worked great for me, and I'd say it all the time.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for this conversation.
Thank you.
Celebrate